People often ask how I sleep or what I did to my family. They call me heartless. But they don't know the math. I tell them. I paid off my parents' entire mortgage and became the legal owner. Then they changed my lock and gave my master suite to my brother because he has a baby. I didn't argue. I served evictions at dinner. Now they're all kind of homeless, and I am $300,000 richer. It wasn't revenge. It was just business. Before the profit and the silence, there was just the noise. 6 months ago, my phone vibrated off the nightstand at 2 in the morning. It was my father, Ronald. I almost let it ring out. I knew the pattern too well. If they were calling past midnight, it wasn't to ask how my construction company was doing. It was a crisis. I picked up, expecting a minor car accident or a bail request for Kenzo. Instead, I heard my father sobbing like a child. He couldn't form sentences at first. Between gasps for air, the truth finally tumbled out. Foreclosure. Bank notices ignored. The auction was scheduled for 6 weeks out. My mother, Cassandra, was wailing in the background, a high-pitched sound that scraped against my eardrums. "We need you, Larry." Ronald choked out. "Be a good son. Don't let us lose the house." It was the weapon they always used. They didn't want a solution. They wanted a bailout. This time, the price tag was 6 figures. I didn't drive over immediately. I waited 3 days. I called my lawyer first, then my accountant. When I finally pulled my truck into the cracked driveway of my childhood home, the grass was knee-high. The siding was peeling in gray strips. It looked like a tomb for ambition. I grabbed my leather portfolio from the passenger seat. I didn't bring groceries or sympathy this time. I brought paperwork. I walked to the front door, prepared to buy a house, not save a family. They were waiting at the kitchen table, surrounded by unopened mail. Cassandra rushed to hug me, tears streaming. But I stopped her with a raised hand. I sat down and slid the documents across the sticky wood surface. "I'll pay the arrears and the principal," I said, voice flat. "But I am not giving you money." I tapped the quitclaim deed. "I am buying the debt. You sign the title over to me today. I own it. You rent it." The room went dead silent. Ronald looked at the papers like I had placed a live grenade on the table. "You'd treat your own parents like tenants?" he asked, his face flushing red. "It's disrespectful." He wasn't worried about losing the asset, he was worried about losing face. I uncapped my pen and set it down. "The alternative is the sheriff evicting you next month," I replied. "Sign or I leave." They signed. They thought they were just humoring me. They didn't realize I had just seized the helm. It took exactly 7 days for the deed to record. 7 days where my parents acted like nothing had changed, as if the signed papers were just a bad dream. When I returned on a Tuesday morning, the house smelled like stale grease and heavy denial. I walked the perimeter first, clipboard in hand. Noting the damage. The foundation had a hairline crack running along the north wall. The gutters were choked with 3 autumns' worth of rotted leaves. Ronald had spent years talking about maintenance while letting the structure rot around him. I unlocked the front door and went straight for the kitchen ceiling. The water stain I had fixed 5 years ago was back, darker and wider, spreading like a deep bruise. I poked a screwdriver into the drywall and it crumbled into black dust. Mold. It was crawling behind the cabinets and eating the insulation. My father stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me work. "I was getting to that," he muttered. "Just needed the right weather." He had let poison grow in the walls for years. I moved down the hallway to inspect the bedrooms. The guest room was piled high with boxes labeled "Misc." My old room, the smallest one, was filled with broken furniture and bags of old clothes. But the real shock was Kenzo's old room. It was enshrined. His trophies were dusted, and his bed was made with crisp linens. It looked like a museum exhibit for a son who didn't even live there anymore. Meanwhile, my history had been packed into garbage bags and shoved into the attic. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my lawyer confirming the title transfer was complete. The house was mine. The debt was mine. The liability was mine. I walked back to the living room where Cassandra was watching a talk show. "Turn it off," I said. She looked up, startled by my tone. "This isn't a home anymore, Mom. It's a job site." I needed them to understand the shift immediately. We weren't a family helping each other out. I was the developer now. They were living in my workspace. I laid the blueprints on the coffee table, covering a ring from a wet glass. "I am gutting the kitchen and the main bath," I announced. "New roof next week. Vec the week after." Ronald scoffed, shaking his head at the plans. "You are doing too much, son. Just patch the roof." I ignored him completely. "I am putting 200 grand into this place. That means contractors, noise, and dust." I looked them both in the eye. "And there is one rule. Just one. Keep the common areas clean," I said. "No dishes in the sink. No laundry on the couch. I need clear pathways for my crew." They nodded, looking relieved it wasn't an eviction notice yet. I left them there and walked to the garage to grab my heavy demo bar. When I came back inside 10 minutes later to start ripping up the carpet, there was already a dirty coffee mug sitting on my blueprints. I stared at the ring of moisture soaking into the paper, knowing exactly how this would end. The sun on the roof was brutal, baking the shingles until they felt like molten tar against my boots. I spent 14 hours a day up there, tearing off rot and laying down waterproof barriers. My hands were blistered, my back a constant knot of pain. From the yard, the house looked like a war zone. I could hear the television drifting up through the open windows. While I secured their shelter, they sat in air-conditioned comfort, complaining about the noise. I climbed down the ladder at noon, covered in grit and sweat. The living room was dark, curtains drawn tight against the light. Kenzo was sprawled on the couch, headset on, shouting commands at a screen. He didn't even look up when I walked past. "Can you keep it down?" he yelled into his mic. Construction noise is killing my focus. He was 30, unemployed, and treating my work like an inconvenience. I gripped my water bottle until the plastic crunched. I started ripping out the lower cabinets in the kitchen. Cassandra hovered near the doorway, holding a magazine. "You know, Larry," she said, pointing at the empty space. "The island really needs to be bigger. We need room for bar stools." She spoke like a client dictating terms to a hired contractor. "Marble would be nice too." She wasn't offering to pay for anything. She just expected the upgrade. I kept swinging my sledgehammer, letting the crash of wood drown out her voice. Demolition exposed more than just rot. Beneath the sink, tucked behind a false panel, I found a rusted metal box. It was Ronald's old filing system for house receipts. I had sent them $5,000 3 years ago, specifically to fix the leaking roof. They had sworn it was done. I pried the box open with a flathead screwdriver, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside were stacks of faded paper. I sat on the dusty subfloor and started reading. The dates lined up perfectly. The week I wired the roof money. There were no receipts for shingles or labor. Instead, there was a withdrawal slip for the exact amount. It matched a down payment on a car Kenzo had bought that same month. A car he crashed weeks later. My labor hadn't been ignored. It had been embezzled. I stared at the numbers, feeling a cold knot tighten. They had let the water damage spread so Kenzo could drive a sedan. I didn't confront them. Screaming wouldn't get the money back. And it wouldn't fix the roof. I put the receipts in my pocket and stood up. The betrayal clarified the mission. I wasn't saving a family home. I was reclaiming a stolen investment. I picked up the sledgehammer again. The next swing was harder, shattering the frame. I worked through the anger, turning resentment into sweat. Every nail I pulled felt like severing another tie to their expectations. The house had bones again. The roof was sealed, the subfloors level, and the drywall fresh. It was starting to look like a showroom. But the cleaner it got, the more comfortable they became. Ronald started walking around with his chest out, pointing at my work like he had supervised it. "We're really turning this place around," he told a neighbor. He used the word, "we," with zero shame. They watched the value rise and mistook my investment for their inheritance. By month 3, the sawdust had settled into a fine coat over everything I owned. I was installing baseboards in the hallway, the pneumatic nail gun hissing with every trigger pull. It was the only rhythm I trusted in the chaos. Then the front door opened, letting in a gust of humid air and the sound of a diesel engine idling. Cassandra walked in, clapping her hands together like a theater director. "Great news, Larry," she chirped. "Kenzo and Clover are here. Just until they find a place." She didn't ask. She announced. Clover waddled in behind her, one hand resting on her baby bump like a shield against criticism. Kenzo followed, dragging 2 massive suitcases that scraped deep, white gouges into my newly refinished hardwood floors. "Hey bro," Kenzo muttered, not making eye contact. He dropped the heavy bags right in the middle of the foyer, blocking the path I needed for materials. Clover looked around, wrinkling her nose at the smell of fresh varnish. "It smells chemically," she said. "Is that safe for the baby?" She was already auditing the safety of a house she didn't own. I didn't answer her question, choosing instead to watch as she started a self-guided tour. She walked into the kitchen, running a manicured fingernail along the quartz countertops I had installed yesterday. "Gray is so dated," she commented to Cassandra, loud enough for me to hear. I really wanted warmer tones, something inviting. She spoke as if I were a negligent contractor who had ignored her design brief. Cassandra nodded in agreement, completely forgetting that I had paid for every slab of stone with my own savings. That evening, the air in the house felt thick and suffocating. I was cleaning my brushes in the utility sink when Ronald cornered me. He leaned against the dryer, crossing his arms in a pose of fox authority. "We need to talk about logistics, son," he started, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Kenzo and Clover need space. They're starting a family." I kept scrubbing the latex paint off the bristles. "The guest room is ready," I said. "It has a bed. It's clean." Ronald sighed, looking disappointed. "The guest room is tight." Ronald pressed, stepping closer into my personal space. "Clover needs room for a crib, and the changing table, and all the gear." He paused, waiting for me to offer a solution. When I didn't, he said it plain. "You are a single man, Larry. You are at work all day. You don't really need the master suite, do you? It's wasted space." The audacity took my breath away. That suite was the one place I had built entirely for myself. Soundproofed walls, reinforced door, my sanctuary. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands slowly on a rag. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "The master suite is mine. I built it. I paid for it. It stays mine." Ronald's face tightened, his jaw working as he swallowed his anger. "Ideally, family makes sacrifices," he muttered, pushing off the dryer to leave. "Ideally, family pays rent." I shot back. He didn't respond, but the look he gave me wasn't fatherly. It was purely transactional. I went upstairs to lock my door, needing the click of the deadbolt to feel safe in my own property. As I reached the landing, I heard Clover's voice, drifting from the open door of the master suite. She was standing inside my room, hands on her hips, visualizing furniture placement. "The crib would look perfect in that corner," she told Kenzo. "We can call this the family suite." They weren't asking anymore. The walls were freshly painted, but the air in the house was getting toxic. Life with Kenzo and Clover was death, by 1,000 cuts. It wasn't just the noise, it was the theft. I'd buy a gallon of milk in the morning, and by evening, the carton sat empty in the trash. My socket wrench set, organized by size, started migrating. I found the 10mm socket in the nursery, being used to prop open a stuck window. When I confronted Kenzo, he shrugged, eyes glued to his phone. "We're family, man. What's yours is ours." He didn't just say it. He believed it. The laundry room became the next battlefield. I put a load of work clothes in on Tuesday night, heavy with drywall dust. When I went to swap them to the dryer, I found my wet clothes in a heap on the dirty tile floor. Clover's delicates were spinning in the machine instead. I needed the cycle right now, she told me later, eating my yogurt. Baby clothes have to be sanitized. She didn't apologize. She expected me to thank her for the lesson. My only retreat was the master suite. I started locking it, even when I was just going downstairs for water. The heavy click of the deadbolt was the only sound that lowered my blood pressure. I installed a discreet camera facing the door, just to be sure. Every night, I checked the footage. Every day, around noon, the handle jiggled. Sometimes it was Kenzo, sometimes Clover. They were testing the perimeter, waiting for a mistake. The siege was quiet, but it was constant. On a Friday, I came home to find them all sitting in the living room. The television was off. This was an ambush. Ronald cleared his throat. gesturing to the armchair like it was a witness stand. "We need to have a house meeting," he announced. "About the space allocation." Cassandra nodded, looking pained. "It's just not fair, Larry. You have the biggest room, and you are barely here. Clover is nesting. She needs that energy." They spoke like the deed was irrelevant. I didn't sit down. I stood in the entryway, boots still coated in job site mud. "The room isn't up for debate," I said, voice low. "I told you this when I bought the debt." Clover let out a dramatic sigh, rubbing her belly. "It's selfish," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Keeping all that light to yourself, while a baby suffers in a cramped guest room." She made me the villain of my own charity. They looked at me with genuine disgust. That look changed everything. Until that moment, I thought they were just entitled. Now I realized they were delusional. In their minds, I hadn't bought the house. I had just paid a fee to rejoin the family hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, I was at the bottom. The deed, the mortgage payments, the sweat equity, none of it mattered against the needs of the golden child. I was just the live-in handyman who had gotten uppity. I gripped my keys tight in my pocket. "I am not moving," I said, ending the meeting before it could really start. I turned my back on them and walked up the stairs. The silence behind me was heavy, filled with unspoken plans. I could feel their eyes drilling into my back. I went into my suite and double-checked the lock. It felt sturdy, but for the first time, I wondered if steel was enough. I stopped arguing. I just kept the key in my pocket and the receipt in my wallet. It was a Tuesday night when the thread finally snapped. I had just pulled a 14-hour shift at a commercial site, hauling conduit through a muddy trench in the pouring rain. My boots were caked with clay, and my shoulders throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that promised a sleepless night. I walked into the house craving nothing but the high-pressure shower in my master bath and 12 hours of silence. The living room was empty, the television dark, but the air felt charged with a strange, nervous energy. I dragged my feet up the stairs, leaving faint mud prints that I didn't bother to wipe up. I reached for my doorknob, but my hand grasped unfamiliar metal. The brushed nickel lever I had installed 2 months ago was gone, replaced by a cheap, shiny brass knob that looked like it cost $10 at a discount hardware store. I stared at it, my brain lagging behind the visual input. The wood around the strike plate was splintered and raw, exposing the pale pine beneath the paint. Someone had taken a chisel to the frame and butchered the jamb to make the new latch fit. I tried my key anyway, but it slid into the cylinder and hit a wall. Before I could process the hardware, the sounds from inside the room hit me. The muffled murmur of the television was playing a reality show I hated, and then came the distinct, throaty laugh of my brother. "This mattress is insane," Kenzo said, his voice muffled by the heavy soundproofing I had paid for. "Way better than the guest bed." Clover murmured something back, sounding sleepy and satisfied. They were settled in. They weren't just visiting my room, they were nesting in it. The heat rose in my neck, not like a flush, but like a chemical burn spreading under my skin. I stepped back and finally looked down the hallway to the left. There, piled against the linen closet like roadside trash, was my life. My custom-built gaming PC was sitting on the carpet at a crooked angle. The tempered glass side panel cracked near the corner. My heavy steel safe, which weighed nearly 300 pounds, had been dragged out, leaving deep gouges in the hardwood I had just refinished. Trash bags filled with my clothes were stacked haphazardly on top of my pillows. They hadn't packed me up with care, they had evicted me with a shovel. The brass knob turned, and the door swung open. Kenzo stood there, silhouetted by the warm light of my bedside lamps. He was wearing my charcoal waffle knit robe, holding a glass of my whiskey. He blinked at me, not with shame, but with mild annoyance that I had interrupted his evening. "Chill out, man," he said, taking a sip. "Mom said it was okay. You are never here anyway, and Clover's back hurts." He leaned against the doorframe, blocking my view of the room. "Don't be dramatic about it. It's just a room swap. We're family." I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch, even though every muscle in my body was coiled tight enough to snap bone. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I took a photo of the splintered door frame. I took a photo of Kenzo wearing my robe. I walked down the hall and took close-ups of the damaged floor, the cracked PC case, and the mountain of garbage bags. The flash was blinding in the dim hallway, cutting through the shadows. Kenzo straightened up, his smirk faltering. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice suddenly losing its arrogant edge. Cassandra appeared at the top of the stairs, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She saw the phone and the bags and immediately went into defense mode. "Larry, stop it," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "We had to make an executive decision. You weren't answering your phone." She stepped between me and the pile of my belongings. "The baby comes first. You can sleep in the guest room tonight, and we'll figure out the basement for you later." She looked at me with that familiar disappointment, as if my desire for my own bed was a character flaw. I looked at them. My mother shielding the trash, my brother occupying my sanctuary, and I felt the last tether sever. I didn't say a word to either of them. I grabbed one small duffel bag from the pile, the one that held my passport and emergency cash. I turned around and walked back down the stairs, the mud on my boots drying into a crust. "Where are you going?" Ronald called from the living room, finally looking up from his paper. "We saved you a plate." I walked out the front door and let it slam shut behind me. I drove to a mid-range hotel 3 towns over, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I sat on the stiff mattress in my dirty work clothes, staring at the beige wall until the sun started to bleed through the curtains. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I pulled up the email app on my phone and started typing to my lawyer. I attached the photos of the damage and the unauthorized lock. The subject line was short and brutal. I typed 2 words, "Evict everyone." Then I hit send and finally took off my boots. I stayed away for exactly 48 hours, letting the silence ferment into a false sense of victory for them. When I finally pulled into the driveway on Thursday evening, the house was glowing with warmth. I could see them through the bay window I had installed, gathered around the dining table like a Norman Rockwell painting. They were laughing, passing steaming bowls of mashed potatoes, completely unbothered by my absence. They assumed I was sulking in a motel and would return to apologize for my outburst. I killed the engine and grabbed the manila envelopes. I unlocked the front door with my master key, the tumblers clicking loud in the quiet foyer. The laughter died instantly as I walked into the dining room. Ronald looked up, fork suspended halfway to his mouth, a nervous smile twitching on his lips. "There he is," he said too loud. "We kept a plate warm for you, son. Sit down." I didn't sit. I walked to the head of the table and placed 4 envelopes on the polished wood. They landed with a heavy, final thud that silenced the room. "What is this?" Cassandra asked, her voice trembling slightly as she reached for the closest packet. She opened it, scanning the bold text at the top. Her face went pale, draining of all color in seconds. "Notice to quit," she whispered, looking up at me with wet, betrayed eyes. "You are evicting us. Your own parents." Ronald snatched the paper from her, reading it frantically. "This is insane, Larry," he sputtered, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "You can't evict family. We have a lease. We have rights." I met his gaze, feeling absolutely nothing. "You had a lease," I corrected him, my voice steady and cold. "Clause 4. Section B regarding alterations to the property. You changed the locks." I pointed at Kenzo, who was staring at his own envelope like it was a bomb. "Clause 7. Regarding damage to the premises. You destroyed the door frame and the hardwood." I looked at Clover. "Unauthorized occupants. It's all documented. The lease is void. You have 30 days to vacate before the sheriff removes you forcibly." Kenzo stood up, his face twisting into an ugly snarl. "I am not going anywhere," he shouted, stepping toward me with clenched fists. "I have a pregnant wife." "You are going to throw a baby on the street." Clover started sobbing loudly, a theatrical wail meant to shame me into submission. "How can you be so cruel?" she screamed. "He's your brother." They were throwing everything they had at me. Guilt, anger, biology. But they had broken the one thing that actually mattered in the real world, the contract. "I am not the one who broke the agreement," I said, stepping back toward the door. "You gambled on my patience and you lost." Ronald tried to grab my arm, his grip desperate and weak. "We can fix the door, Larry. We'll put your things back. Just sit down." I pulled my arm away, dusting off the sleeve of my jacket. "It's too late for repairs," I told him. "You communicate through my lawyer from now on. If you damage anything else before you leave, I will sue you for the difference." The next month passed in a surreal legal blur. They didn't pack a single box. They truly believed it was a bluff, a temper tantrum that would blow over if they just ignored it. My lawyer forwarded me voicemails from Ronald. Some begging, some threatening. All delusional. They kept living in the house, adding more scratches to the floor and more stains to the carpet, convinced that biology trumped property law. I didn't visit. I didn't answer calls. I just waited for the court date to arrive and the gavel to fall. The 30 days expired on a rainy Tuesday. I parked across the street, watching as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 deputies got out, their uniforms dark and imposing against the gray sky. They knocked on the door hard, authoritative raps that echoed down the block. I saw the blinds twitch. They didn't answer at first, so the deputies used the key I had provided. The front door swung open, and I could hear the shouting start almost immediately. The reality of the situation was finally crashing down on them. It was chaotic and ugly. They had 10 minutes to grab essentials before being escorted off the premises. Kenzo came out first, carrying a laundry basket of clothes, looking terrified. Clover followed, screaming at the deputies about her rights. Cassandra was weeping, clutching a photo album, while Ronald tried to argue legal theory with a man who had a gun on his hip. They looked small and pathetic standing on the wet sidewalk. Ronald spotted my truck and started walking toward me, arms outstretched, begging, "Son, please, we have nowhere to go." I rolled up the window before he could reach the glass. I watched the locksmith arrive a few minutes later, a guy I used on my sites. He replaced the front door lock and replaced it with a heavy-duty commercial deadbolt. The click of the new lock engaging was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The deputies handed me the new keys and posted the final notice on the door. I drove off, leaving them in the rain, staring at a house they used to own. I waited 24 hours before sending the professional cleaning crew in. I didn't want to see the immediate aftermath myself. When I finally walked through the front door, the air smelled like bleach and lemon oil, erasing the scent of stale resentment and cheap cologne. The cleaners had scrubbed Kenzo's gouges from the hardwood and hauled away the trash bags he left behind, filled with spite and discarded clothes. The house echoed, finally empty. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just an asset ready for liquidation. My realtor, a shark named Sarah, walked the property with a greedy smile the next morning. She didn't see the ghost of a family breakdown. She just saw quartz countertops, a brand new roof, and open concept living. "This will go over asking by Monday," she predicted, tapping notes into her tablet. I went upstairs to the master suite one last time. The door frame was repaired, painted fresh white. I installed a new handle, not because I needed to lock it, but to prove that I could. Sarah was right about the market. We had 5 offers within 48 hours, fueled by a desperate shortage of turnkey inventory. I didn't care about the letters from young couples promising to love the garden or raise their kids in the nursery. I looked strictly at the numbers. The highest bid was an all-cash offer from an out-of-state investor who wanted to rent it out. I signed the paperwork electronically while sitting in my truck at a job site. It felt colder than I expected, but the math was warm enough. The closing took 30 days, smooth and silent, without my family's interference slowing down the title work. When the notification hit my phone, I pulled over to the side of the highway to look. $300,000 net profit. That was the price of my childhood, adjusted for inflation and trauma. I stared at the balance, waiting for the guilt to kick in. It never came. Instead, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. I wasn't their backup generator anymore. I was solvent. Before I drove to the bank to transfer the funds, I opened my messages one last time. There was a text from Ronald sent 3 hours ago. "We found a motel. Call us. We can fix this." He still thought fixing this meant me writing a check. He still thought he had leverage. I didn't reply. I tapped his name and hit block caller. Then I did the same for Cassandra, Kenzo, and Clover. The silence that followed was absolute and expensive. I used a small fraction of the money to put a down payment on a modern condo downtown. It has a doorman, a gym, and concrete walls thick enough to block out the world. The first thing I bought wasn't furniture or a massive television. It was a high-security smart lock for my front door. I keyed the code in, heard the heavy steel bolt slide into place, and finally exhaled. They wanted a savior. I just wanted a return on investment. I got mine.